Hi guys, so if you are looking to have a nice little driving holiday and you are hoping to cross over between the North and South Island of New Zealand over summer, then do yourself a favour and book yourself a place on the ferry as soon as possible. Last summer, Inter Islander had the following ferries in operation: Aratiri, which carries up to 650 passengers and 230 cars; Kaitaki, which carries up to 1,000 passengers and 600 cars; and Kairahi, which carries up to 550 passengers and 525 cars. Then you had Blue Bridge, which had the following ferries in operation: Connemara, which carries up to 500 passengers and 195 cars; and the Strait Ferry, which carries up to 400 passengers and 150 cars. But this summer, Inter Islander has Kaitaki, which, as we have said, carries up to 1,000 passengers and 600 cars, and Kairahi, which, as we have said, carries up to 550 passengers and 525 cars. And this summer, Blue Bridge has the Levia, which carries up to 500 passengers and 200 cars, and the Connemara, which, like we have said, carries up to 500 passengers and 195 cars. So last summer, the total ferry passenger capacity was 3,100 people. And this year, the total passenger capacity will be 2,550 people. And last summer, the total car capacity was 1,700 cars. And this year, the total car capacity will be 1,520 cars. These calculations are not even taking into account the truck capacity, which is greatly reduced also and could in fact start eating into the car capacity if needed. The Aratiri, which is just retired, was also the last rail ferry. But now, instead of just rolling rail on and off, any goods have to be lifted off the train onto a truck bed, which is then driven onto the ferry. Imagine how much extra time and effort this adds to each journey. And this is not just a short-term thing. For some reason, which is definitely not just out of spite, Nicola Willis decided to cancel the iReX project, which was going to see the ageing Inter-Islander fleet replaced with 2 large rail-enabled ferries. The iReX project was also going to see major future-proofing port infrastructure projects in Wellington and Picton. The iReX project, which was originally going to cost $1.45 billion in 2021, blew out to about $3 billion in 2023 because the cost of the terminal upgrades had been severely underestimated. Obviously, this was not good planning by Jacinda's Labour government, and it showed a real amateurish streak, which they became masters at. But for Nicola Willis to just cancel that project without any real alternative made Labour look like experts in their field. The iReX project cancellation has now cost $671 million. That consists of $78 million deposit and part settlement, $144 million break fee, and $449 million project management, landside infrastructure, and wind down costs. That is taxpayers' money down the drain. And as Willis was cancelling this vital ferry crossing because the costs were just too high to bear for the taxpayer, at the same time Luxon was reintroducing interest deductibility for landlords, which is costing the taxpayer $2.92 billion in the first 4 years of its reintroduction, and will obviously be costing the taxpayer upwards of $1 billion per year after that, and this value will be forever going up. Once again, the whole country has been thrown under the bus just to make some landlords even richer. The incredible new terminal infrastructure in Wellington and Picton would have been in place for many years to come, and the top of the range roll-on roll-off safe ferries would have been a jewel in the crown for New Zealand tourism. Instead now, we are left waiting to see what wonders Winston Peters is going to pull out of the bag. It has just been announced that China's state-backed Guangzhou shipyard has won the contract to construct the 2 new Cook Strait ferries. Apparently, Peters has secured a fixed price for the ferries, which will be 2 200-metre long ferries with road and rail decks, and room for 1,500 passengers each. Hopefully, we will all find out how much savings have been made. But when we are working out the savings, we will also have to add in the cost of not having a rail roll-on roll-off ferry for 4 years. And we'll also have to add in the cost of repairs to the aging ferries over those 4 years. And the cost of delays for passengers over those 4 years due to reduced capacity. And the inevitable cost increases to passengers that will happen due to price hikes due to a reduced capacity over the next 4 years too. We'll have to include the jobs that have already been lost thanks to the retirement of the Aratiri, with no replacement ferry for them people to go and work on. And the extra cost of the new significant infrastructure that is needed for the new ships, like the extension of the existing Wellington wharf and the new overbridge that is to be built in Picton to separate road traffic from freight trains. So yes guys, and the depressing thing is that the first of the iReX ferries would have been getting delivered this month, at a time when the country could do with a lift. Just imagine how great it would have been to head down to Wellington and watch this new ferry's maiden voyage. Instead, we are left with vague promises about things that may come in the future that may be much cheaper, but in reality won't be when you take into account all of the hidden costs that cancelling this project has created. I do suppose instead of seeing a nice new shiny ferry and nice new ferry terminals, we do at least get to see the landlords driving around in their flash new cars that they can now afford thanks to Luxon's charity handouts. This whole debacle has been a total disaster, and worse still, now we have at least 4 more years with old ferries that have been breaking down left, right and centre for years now. And these ferries will be getting pushed harder and harder and harder to try and make up for the reduced capacity. What could possibly go wrong? Poor New Zealand needs a new way forward. The people's best interests are being ignored, with just a small fraction of society being prioritised over and over again. Even seeing New Zealand's biggest ever mass emigration taking place has not made Luxon stop and think if what he is supporting is best for the country. And now we have the RBNZ puppets coming out of the woodwork once again and doing their master's bidding by loosening LVR requirements right after slashing interest rates. And these unelected bureaucrats pretend that pumping the housing Ponzi is not even on their radar when it is so obviously front and centre and their main target. And just look at all the big personalities who have supposedly become leaders in New Zealand to make New Zealand a better place. And look at the mess they've left behind. And then look at the wealth that they have somehow amassed for themselves all of a sudden, and ask yourself, are these people really doing what's best for the country or what's best for themselves and their rich and powerful friends? I think we all know the answer, don't we? New Zealand needs major change, and not just blue to red nothingness change. It needs real structural change. Change that means that young Kiwis see a future in their own country for once and decide to stay home. Change that stops the exploitation of the most basic human right, which is shelter, and change that levels the playing field and means that those on top have no longer got the upper hand. Right now the options are limited, but one thing is for sure, Luxon and Hipkins should be the last thing that anyone who cares about New Zealand considers voting for. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, please like and subscribe and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers for that.